we have fewer questions than last month.
Whew. That's good. Until the month when Ruination no longer occurs. Where one guy gets like a 45-minute question. Well, you know, the more that I think about my favorite hot lunch from the school cafeteria.
Welcome to the Idle Thumbs Ruination Online for October 2017. I'm Chris Remo.
I'm Nick Brecken.
I'm Jake Rodkin. We don't always introduce ourselves on the Ruination.
Well, we're
Sometimes
supposed
we just
to.
sort of roll into it.
So now we have. This is the monthly stream on which we answer questions posed to us by high-tier patrons on our Patreon campaign. If you want more information about that or to figure out how to become one such patron, go to patreon.com/idlethumbs. And with that...
With that sound, sound means it's time for...
You know what that means, Nick? It means it's time to answer questions. Are you guys ready to answer them?
I am ready.
Let's do it. Okay. Tom Grundy writes, does Nick write for Curb Your Enthusiasm? I assume that means. The first episode of this season was called Foisted. Is there secretly a laundering of important if true nonsense into Larry David's magnum opus? When can I expect Larry David to get into an argument over who originated the poop in a bag story? Hopefully never.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's
let's hope that
biohazard waste stays contained to our stupid pod bag.
Mm-hmm. We did talk about Foisted on Important if True, did we not?
Didn't make it in.
Oh, it didn't make it in.
No.
Oh, all right. Well then.
Yeah.
All new Foisted content.
We did remark on it. Yeah.
It didn't end up connecting back to anything else in the Important if True episode, so it didn't end up in the episode. But yes, I do remember watching that, and it was almost an uncanny feeling. Like it felt
weird.
like I was watching something from a slightly different universe.
Well, the thing that happened to me was I just immediately imagined you on your couch watching that episode and having like a reaction.
Did you imagine Chris doing the face from when he discovered the dancing in Headlander did you imagine like a surprised like holy shit, Chris, or more sort of like just oh no, like what?
Oh no, I imagine the 11:11 like kind of like oh my god, Chris, like you know the like the Larry. I mean that's Larry basically does that.
Well, there's sort of there's two different Twitch avatars of Chris. One of which is sort of like incredulous screaming of like what, and the other one is like oh wow. Which was it? Both of those in succestion?
Yeah,
probably?
I think it was probably both.
Okay,
repeated 30 times on a keyboard.
Yeah.
But no, that was weird.
Yeah,
definitely strange.
This is all in reference to our other podcast, Important if True. If you don't listen to that or know what that is,
we say the word hoisted.
We say
on that
hoisted
podcast
a lot, which is what this is.
Well, I think we talked about this in the cut material.
Yeah.
But the weird part about it, like the weirdest aspect of it, was that they sort of reduced it to foisted by the end of it, as opposed to
it went through the exact same pattern that our use of.
It wasn't so much the word as it was the
hoist by your own petard
refining of it,
and reduced it and sort of like reduced it down to hoisted as an exclamation, and that's exactly what happened in this Curb Your Enthusiasm episode, in which the notion of foisting an employee, an unwanted employee onto another employer, gets reduced down to foisted. Yeah. In this this sort of declamation. Anyway, Jussie asks.
Juicy Jesse.
What would each of you make for a living if making video games weren't an option?
More money. Oh, sorry. What?
We're correctly assuming here that podcasting doesn't make enough to live on. I mean, podcasting does make enough to live on for some people, but it has to operate at a higher scale than it does for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've talked about this before, though.
Yeah.
What was the name that I thought of last week? That if we renamed ourselves like the Power Glove Tron Crew,
right?
If we were more interested in just like blasting out tons of nerd content all the time, it's insane how much money you can make if you just look at Patreon campaigns.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a ton of secret skill to that we do not understand because there are many people who do that who fail at it horribly.
Yeah, there's a reason some people appeal to more people than others. Yeah.
I don't think we know how to do that, actually.
I think, the podcast stuff we like doing is so weird and specific and dumb that, I mean, it's all dumb, but like it's dumb in such a specific way that it probably limits our earning potential to some degree.
But if you didn't make video games, what would you do? And how much would you make? You don't have to say that part. I can give a salary quote. No.
I have no idea how much anyone makes to do anything.
No, same. That's actually a problem that I have whenever, like, you guys have done more freelancing than me.
Yeah.
But whenever I end up taking on a freelance job, which I have done a couple times sort of when between game projects, I never know how much money to ask for. I absolutely never know.
It's a real problem,
So I'm just like, $200? $20,000? Like, Jesus.
Any amount in between
I have no idea.
Yeah.
So like that leads to me not knowing how much anyone makes or lives on or anything, especially coupled with like where you live and how long you've lived there. Like your cost of living is so ridiculous, at least sort of along the west coast of the U.S., which is where I know most people.
I think the only way to develop that knowledge is simply for it to be enough of your ongoing time and income that you just generate data points to realize, oh, this is the maximum amount.
Yeah.
This kind of company will pay for this kind of work for someone with my amount of
pushing your ceiling until someone absolutely balks at it, but you have to have enough work opportunities to do that. Because like the worst feeling is when you're like, that'll be $2,500. The person goes, great, good.
Right.
And you're like,
God damn it.
Okay. Well, could have probably put a lot more on that one. Anyway, what job would you do? What?
I don't know. This is always a terrifying question to me because working, it's been so many years. It's been so many years since I've done something that wasn't. I mean, making video games I've been doing for 8 years now, but even longer than that, my job has been directly related to video games. I mean, that has been for 14 years at this point or something like that. I don't even know, something like that, 13, 14 years. And so I don't even, it's really sad, but like, I don't even know what other things I'm equipped or capable of doing. All the things that come to my brain are things that I'm not qualified to do, that are just other cool jobs that anyone would want.
Put the word ideally in that question. Like, ideally, what would you
What would you do? What would you make?
Oh, ideally, I would probably. I don't know. Actually, I have no fucking idea.
Yeah,
Jesus
it's hard.
Christ.
It's
a really
hard.
difficult question. I mean, you can give goofy answers, but they're not realistic.
Ideally for me, I can't pick a single like career track, but I think my ideal situation would be to be able to pursue a bunch of smaller projects without worrying about them being the thing that my livelihood is contingent on.
Yeah.
And I get a taste of that by working at a game company and by owning a game company, but even then the scope of the projects are huge by like a single person's standards, and they have to actually hit successful metrics and whatever else. I can't just you can't just dick around. So my ideal job would be dicking around.
Actually,
just making stuff.
Since we're talking about ideal and like it doesn't ever have to mean anything because it's all bullshit. This is actually a thing that I think about that I would love to have in my professional life. A thing I think about a lot is projects made by a very small number of people of a scope that is significant enough to do something that is, generally broadly appealing to people, but is small scale enough within the context of its field that it doesn't have as much scrutiny or requirement to like have huge returns, that persists over a long period of time, that sort of settles into an equilibrium that allows its creator to also work on other interesting things.
So you wish you'd made Minecraft.
Oh. No, that's not what I mean.
I mean, think about what kind of person you'd be right now.
Well, that would be great because you'd have tons of money. Then you could do whatever you want. But that's not what I mean. I mean, like, I have actually specific examples across different types of things. Like, if you think...
I actually have brought with you.
No, I don't have any, like, case studies. But I just, like, it's a thing I've noticed. Like, if you think about a show, like, these seem like a weird thing to pair, but if you think about a show like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia or like The Venture Brothers, those shows are very, very different in terms of their production. One's live action, one's a cartoon. One's science fiction, one is not. Like they're very different, but they're both the product of a fairly small number of people that have run for a long time, that are about really specific kind of they have unusual premises, are about very specific things, and as they've gone farther and farther into their runs, they have delved deeper and deeper and deeper into the very specific things each of those shows are about, and with that, they've been able to become really weird and deep in ways that are surprising that would not necessarily be apparent if you just watched the first season of each of those shows, because they have developed an entire like moral universe unto themselves and have developed like, and when I say universe, I don't mean like lore in the sense of science fiction, even though the Venture Brothers has that. I mean that they have developed like a sort of system of mechanics of how the world and characters in them works that are really specific to those creations. And I find that really appealing. And there are game examples of that as well. This is a smaller scale project, but nonetheless, like our friends Zach and Kevin who make Kingdom of Loathing, exactly.
Seems like what you're talking about. Yeah.
That game has never like clicked with me personally, specifically, but it's a very long-running project that reflects the sensibility of its creators, exists at a small enough scale that they can keep making it on an ongoing basis and really directly, like, strongly connect with its audience in a way that a lot of things aren't going to, because it doesn't have to be a huge mass market, like, hitting all quadrants success. And that is really, really, really appealing to me. And I would love to, at some point in my life, have some like vector to exercise that kind of ongoing sensibility. Because when I think about something like Idle Thumbs, it is like it scratches the surface of that sometimes. You know, like it is a long-term project on which we have developed a particular sensibility. And like as the person who edits it, like I have this sort of almost decade at this point of like weird little sort of tricks and ideas I have that go into it. But because it is purely a free time project, I a lot of times just have to do the shortest line from point A to point B to get the thing out the door, because I'm just too busy in my life and I have an actual real full-time job on top of it. But like having that very long-term relationship with a small to mid-scale project that allows you to exert a specific creative arc over time is incredibly appealing to me, and I wish I had a better way in my life to like engage with that and express that.
It's just to keep talking about this, but in a completely different way. Now that you're talking about that, it's funny having worked on and with Idle Thumbs related materials for 13 years, 14.
Yeah, if you go back before the podcast, almost 14 years.
We don't do large scale Idle Thumbs stuff that often anymore, other than putting out a weekly podcast. But whenever we do, like when we put the Patreon together or whenever we're sort of like redesigning a website, it is amazing how comfortable and like enjoyable it is for me to sort of slide back into the seat of like, oh, I get to play in Idle Thumbs world now, because that is the only one of those that I really have.
Yeah. Yep. It's a nice thing that is just like always there, and there's a core of the audience who, you know, whether they've been there for a year or for 10 years, sort of like it just clicks with them in a way that when we do put out some of the weirder or stuff we do or stuff that we don't know if it's going to work or not, you get that like good sort of, you can bounce off a core of people who like broadly sort of intangibly understand the vibe of the thing. And that's really appealing.
Speaking of things that you could that I've found is really easy to sort of slide back into and do, the Patreon postcards are an example of that. However, attention all Patreon backers. We fucked up and only ordered 5 out of the 6 variant postcards from last month, which is why you haven't gotten them yet, despite us telling you that you would get them.
We're going to send out a couple hundred of them today, though. Yeah. That are not that variant. That variant will be coming in soon, and then the next month will come in soon.
Yes.
Sorry. There's someone who asks about that again in this. So.
Oh, well, I jumped the gun.
That's okay. All right. Well, that's that.
That was our good opening question.
That was the second question. From the same asker, bonus question because I missed last month because of the short notice. What kind of a robot would you most like to live with? Asking for a human friend. Okay.
Live with.
Yeah. Live with. A nice one.
The dumbest one possible. Like literally the dumbest, like.
Well, that's what definition of dumb? I mean, do you mean like
the one that's like okay in the parlance of our times in which smart is used in the context of AI and robotics to refer to something that is connected to a global network.
Sure, you want the
things.
dumbest one possible. You want the robot you already have, your toaster.
Exactly, that's the kind.
Okay, because like saying I want a really dumb robot to live with is just like, oh come on, Larry, like you just have a robot who leaves garbage around and like knocks stuff over. Yeah. Doesn't pay the electric bill on time.
Larry.
Yeah. That's LARRY, which stands for I don't fucking know. Whatever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm not good enough to come up with that one right now.
Oh, I don't know.
Large, autonomous, really robotic. Yeah.
Mm.
I don't know what the Y stands for.
Yeah.
That's how he describes himself. That he puts on sunglasses. He's like wearing a tank top when he does this. You're like, fucking Christ, Larry.
It's impossible for me not to conflate that with Larry David since we were talking about Curb earlier.
Chat suggests LARR-E as the name of Larry.
That's good, yeah. The E could be anything. Anything robotic.
The E is probably everything.
Everything, yeah.
It's the large autonomous, really robotic everything.
Well, that's it. That's our ideal robot.
Yeah, Larry.
Brian Brannon, writes, what is the most memorable experience you've had from any convention you've been to?
Oh, probably that time we went to QuakeCon together to do a live episode of Idle Thumbs, and then we saw a big, huge sign that said the word Butt Clan.
Oh, yeah, that was so much fun.
And then Chris took a picture of it, and then I took a picture of Chris taking a picture of it, and then Steve took a picture of me taking a picture of Chris taking a picture of it, and then I think JP LeBreton took a picture of all of us.
Were you in that, Nick, that picture?
No, Nick was not around for Butt Clan.
Yeah, and then it circled back around.
Yeah, and then I think you got around to the back.
Taking a picture of the end.
Yeah. I made a stupid GIF of that really recently that treated it as if it was like mist, because it shows it was your picture.
Did I see it?
Yeah, I don't know. I was in a reply to someone, and then I had the little like pixel hand to go and click on your phone, and then it cross dissolves into that one, and then cross dissolves all the way up to the Butt Clan picture.
Oh, that's really good. Either I saw that and forgot, or I never saw it. So you should resurface that.
I don't know if that's actually my best convention memory. My best convention memories are usually going like earlier days of PAX, just borrowing games from the board game checkout, and then without permission, just going to a hotel lobby somewhere and drinking a bunch and playing board games. Like that's the best convention memories.
My best might actually be Idle Thumbs 50. Which was super fun. The farewell, the first big
Idle Thumbs 51.
Oh, was it 51?
It's 51.
Yeah, Idle Thumbs 51. Because
seeing that people actually showed up to that was exciting.
Yeah, I remember. I remember we didn't we felt really nervous about that, and we had a bigger room than we expected. It ended up just being really fun. Like not even just like that part, but just the whole thing was just really fun. And that was like a weird point in the life of that podcast.
Well, we called it Idle Thumbs 51, even though we had already done the 13 episodes with Steve, because Nick was back on it. So we were just being dicks.
Yeah. That's true. That wasn't the original farewell.
Right.
The original farewell was
because we had Idle Thumbs 50, which was
video games or whatever.
Yeah, and then we had the Idle Thumbs podcast episodes 1 through 13, and then we had Idle Thumbs 51 live from the
Unicorn
or whatever the hell it was. Yeah.
Yeah. But that was fun. That was a really fun. I just remember that being a blast. And
I wonder if anyone would ever go to an Idle Thumbs live show again, or if we've destroyed our audience too much.
I have no idea. I mean, at something like PAX, probably some people would, but probably fewer than
at that time.
At that time, yeah.
When people were clamoring for more Nick content.
It had
been months without Nick.
The funny thing is, we actually don't even know what our podcast audience was at that point.
No.
Like, we have no idea, because we didn't have any, we had no tracking of that whatsoever. For all we know, it's the same now as it was then. Like, we genuinely have no way to know that.
We probably had like 250,000 listeners or something, and we didn't know it.
I do not think we did.
Probably had like half of, we probably were like.
I definitely don't think we had that.
Back before podcast metrics, we could have been bigger than Serial, and no one can prove it.
That's true. We probably were.
I imagine we were. That's why we managed to get like 100 people in that room.
God, if we'd actually only gotten 100 people, it would have looked like we had 10 people.
Yeah.
When you have 100 people in a room that big, it looks like literally nothing. Okay.
That was a little humble brag from Chris there about how big our audience was. Did you see the crowds? Huge crowds.
I mean, well, but see, conversely,
you can't prove otherwise.
The opposite of what I said, though, the opposite of what I said, which is why it's not actually a humble brag.
Yeah, that AP photographer that took a picture of the giant bomb live panel, that's just an illusion. That's just an illusion.
No. But what I mean is, as long as the room is bigger than like a couple hundred people, if it's pretty much full, it looks like you have a lot of people, regardless of how many you actually have.
Right.
So it works both ways. Like, it's all about a percentage of room filled. It's not so much about the raw numbers.
No, it's like when you have the bowl of candy that you stupidly have in an office, and for a while there, it feels like you're not making a dent in it at all, and then suddenly you're like, oh God, I ate the whole thing, and there's like 6 at the bottom.
Yeah,
I feel like
when
room scale is very similar, where it's like the room is empty, oh, it is full.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Like when you have a disgusting thing of candy corns, yeah.
Nick, do you have a favorite convention memory?
I mean, Idle Thumbs is that show that was pretty much up there.
Sticking with Butt Clan.
Alex Schroeder, no, Butt Clan is good. Alex Schroeder says next month the Rock Band series will turn 10 years old, while Guitar Hero will be 12. Wow. Now that the plastic instrument craze has long since passed, what do you think of those games in retrospect? Do you think they can ever make a comeback like Rock Band 4 and Guitar Hero Live attempted to? Or are they doomed to remain a footnote in the history of gaming, never to return to the mainstream?
I don't know.
It feels like a pet rock to me. It feels like a thing that's, if it comes back, it will be a generational thing.
Yeah, maybe.
I agree with that. I think
maybe. Do you disagree, Nick?
Oh no, yeah, no.
It just feels like it ate itself, like it burned so fast to the point that it was like, it burned through basically like the millennial / Gen X hybrid crowd that was playing it all the way up through Beatles Rock Band of like the only one that we can sell to baby boomers. They got that one out even before it died, and then it's gone. Like it feels like.
I mean, I think if you look through the history of
also there's only 2 years difference between Guitar Hero and Rock Band. It shows
crazy?
how fucking fast that was a fad.
Exactly. That felt like Guitar Hero was around forever.
Yeah.
I mean, this is goes back to what I was saying on the previous Ruination cast about VR and the way that VR sort of VR hasn't fizzled out to the extent that Plastic Instruments have, but it's definitely not where
it's got 12 years to get there.
The bullish expectations were. Yeah, sure. A year or two ago. And I think the thing that this says to me is a thing that has seemed true for a long time, really, which is that any video game trend that relies entirely on extra plastic peripherals in order for it to work at all is not something that is going to last forever. I mean, you look at the Wii, which was bigger than any of these
Just
things
a toy.
when it came out. Which was and the thing is, all these things are cool and like good in a lot of ways. It's not as though they're actually just like cheap gimmicks. It's just that whenever you have to add on like a new additional extra thing that you have to get that isn't like the only thing you need, because if you remember the Wii, the Wii controller was the controller for the Wii, but you also ended up needing other normal controllers for other games.
Nintendo solved that in their case by building that functionality into all of their controllers.
It's true.
Now. Like, Nintendo systems have an
that's
accelerometer.
True. No one's going to do that with plastic guitar. So
right.
Exactly.
That's
the problem.
But that's kind of the other way it can go. Like, a joystick was at one point a novelty peripheral, and it's kind of just fallen into just every game controller has two joysticks built into it.
Stick. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Either your peripheral turns into just the standard thing, and then you can have it, or more likely it gets incorporated into the standard thing, or it goes away.
A headset or a plastic guitar are by design things that can't be true for.
Because the form factor is the important part. Where it turns out with the Wii, the form factor wasn't the important part.
It's the functionality.
It was just this one component of it.
Yeah. Which also, for different reasons, became standard in mobile phones, which I think also helped Nintendo out.
I bet that's true.
A gyroscope and an accelerometer.
Those components are probably dirt cheap.
Yeah, and they're in phones like for device orientation, understanding, and turn-by-turn car navigation and whatever else.
I think the important thing about it becoming incorporated into the standard controller means a developer. There's no onus on a developer to make it critical to the core functionality of their game. That's the other problem. Any weird peripheral that adds a bunch of really specific functionality that can only be used with that peripheral means like you have to take advantage of it. Otherwise, what's the point? And a lot of times those things just aren't necessary for every single game, right?
That's another, like, the Switch, I feel, has made peace with that in such a nice way where, like, you don't have to use the touchscreen if you don't want. You don't have to use the accelerometer if you don't want. But as a developer, you can trust that they're there.
Exactly, yeah. No one has to have bought an additional thing.
Yeah. It's really nice.
Okay, well...
what was the question again? Whatever.
Oh, do you think Plastic Instruments can make a comeback?
Oh,
or are they doomed to remain a footnote in the history?
I think if they do again, it'll just be as another fad. It'll be like, remember Guitar Hero?
Right. It'll be like the way that now we have the NES Mini or whatever, where you buy a guitar and ittle come with all the stuff on the guitar.
The thing is, they even tried to do that. Remember, Bobby Kotick was talking about how maybe Guitar Hero will eventually not need a console because it's such a mainstay of our culture.
But that's different. That's like he was still trying to make that like a central platform thing, whereas the version I'm talking about is just as a novelty that you buy in Walmart or whatever.
Yeah, it's surprising that actually isn't a mainstay already. The Guitar Hero brand didn't devolve its way down into like a $25 plastic guitar.
Thing,
This is a party toy that has 15 songs on it and a little music store inside of it.
Yeah. I mean, you'd think actually that's what Harmonix could have maybe tried, because, well, I don't know, maybe they did. I don't even know well enough what their attempts to revive this stuff were.
Who knows?
Mickey P writes, do you have any nostalgic memories around game packaging? For example, the big cardboard boxes used for PC games, or the case designs used for certain console game releases, or even memorable box art for games.
Yes.
Oh, man.
Definitively yes.
Somebody on Twitter today posted an image of the Super Nintendo game Phalanx, which was...
Is that the one with the banjo guy on it?
The banjo guy with the spaceship in the background, like the far background.
I only knew that box art because it was in rental stores, and I was always like, what is this old man on the it's just literally a photograph of an old man with a banjo.
Yeah.
And it's named for like a Roman military formation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's a game about like you're just a spaceship or something.
Oh.
Like it's like a Gradius or something. But like, man, just seeing that image, I was like, boom, like Ratatouille, like back to walking through Blockbuster and seeing that weird banjo guy, and like, whoa, that game must be lame. But I didn't know it was a spaceship game.
What does it mean? Can you tell what
I
it
just
means?
looked up the backstory behind it. Like, it came up a couple weeks ago, and man, I can't remember it now. But it was something along the lines of the developer just saying, we're just going to do something weird because we can. Like, I think they just didn't want to use the Japanese box art.
Wow.
Because the difference between the Japanese and the U.S. box art for that game is wild. Because obviously one of them is not a photograph of an old man with a banjo.
Yeah.
Weird.
You want to try to find that, Nick?
Yeah.
Well, I have another one that actually, so immediately in response to this, a different reader posted "The Mystery of the Druids" in all caps, and the box art to this game.
Man, Mystery of the Druids is a classic.
Yeah.
It's just that guy going.
It's a druid, I guess, or some kind of monk-like figure, sort of aghast in horror, and it's just rendered in a very funny way that was not intended to be. Funny
a lot of people talk about like just big PC game boxes or like the 90s boxes that were weird shapes like Spectre and Prince of Persia and Tomb Raider and Day of the Tentacle. I personally don't get any sort of feeling when I see those, but it's like I don't really care.
The only version of that is really memorable to me is the large PC. Like an example would be the large PC game boxes that were earlier LucasArts adventures that had hand-painted covers.
Yeah, that's
by
what
people
I was.
like Steve Purcell that were incredibly gorgeous.
I was gonna exactly bring that up. The old hand-painted covers that work. I mean, like Atari game boxes are similar to this, where it's just sort of the implication is the graphics in the game can't quite accompany.
This is what's in your imagination.
Yeah, it can't contain the entire sort of tone of the game in one screenshot, so they paint a painting that's supposed to evoke it. And yeah, like old LucasArts boxes are easily the thing that I have the most nostalgia for.
Monkey Island 1 and 2 are classics.
Yeah, Monkey Island 2 in particular is probably my favorite PC game box art of all time. And I went and visited Steve Purcell's house one time because I worked with him on Sam & Max games at Telltale, and I ran an old Sam & Max fan site in my youth, so I ended up getting to know that guy. He has that painting up above his fireplace. It's an actual,
so great.
It's an actual painting on canvas. Yeah, and it's
so good.
Huge. It's not huge, but it's like it's not quite as big as the giant painting of me, but it's not much.
Not quite as big as the giant painting of me.
But it's not. You just did the Vigo the Carpathian pose while talking about giant paintings of yourself. But it's still very large, and it was the first time I'd ever seen it without any of the text or anything on it, and it was like
amazing.
That was a amazing, good experience to have.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I wish that we're in this phase now of everyone's doing really artsy reinterpretations of movie posters and of soundtracks, and we're getting all these amazing modern versions of those through Mondo and that sort of thing. I wish that someone
have that in games.
No, one, there aren't reinterpretations of games, but two, no one is just going and making good prints of all of those paintings. Some of them are probably lost, but some of them definitely aren't.
Yeah,
and that would be.
It would be a job to track those down.
I know.
Imagine tracking down that Monkey Island 2 thing if you weren't you and didn't happen to go to Steve Purcell's house one time.
I know. I mean, well, they're someone who's interested in doing the legwork.
Yeah, they would just have to talk to a lot of people. They'd
have to go talk to license holders and find it. But Mondo is the Alamo Drafthouse poster group. But my favorite thing that Mondo has ever put out is the original Drew Struzan poster for The Thing, which is the Arctic guy with the sort of light blasting out of his face.
I didn't know that was Drew Struzan.
I'm pretty sure it is.
I believe you. I just didn't know.
They went and got that painting from him and turned it into I believe just a bazillion screen print, and they did a complete a really nice reproduction of literally just the original Thing poster as without any of the text or other design treatments on it.
That's awesome.
It's so good.
Yeah, I bet that looks great.
A lot of these they don't have to be screen print. I don't care, but just
sure,
man. a good, nice. Yeah, I have an original promotional poster for Monkey Island 1 that I got off of eBay years and years and years ago from an old Lucasfilm collector. And like that's one of my favorite possessions that I have because you just can't get that art at that size in a like displayable way.
Yeah.
For like whether it's like people would just go fucking nuts if the if the old Atari 2600 boxes got turned into just like nice art prints that were anyway.
Yeah, I mean, movies have a tradition of movie posters, which are, a lot of times they're garbage, but it's a large format piece of art that is, they're still make them all the time and they're displayed prominently. But now that games are like so much other media are primarily sold digitally, I don't know, probably not primarily, but the box is just, video game box art and it's just never really been consistently great. It's just, there hasn't really been a lot of great traditions outside of a few specific threads of it, and especially these days that just does not matter. Like the only games getting box art are big budget AAA games that are going to do most of their business in GameStop, which is a small number of games in absolute terms, and the point of that is definitely not to make a beautiful looking piece of art in its own right. And so there isn't really a culture of, like, I think that's part of the reason that there isn't the culture of what you're describing of like even reinterpreting old game art, because there isn't a tradition, there isn't a current tradition of making big beautiful art, key art for games in the first place.
One piece of software packaging that I do have an immense amount of nostalgia for from an actual packaging design standpoint is like 80s and early 90s business software. I fucking love it. Where it basically was like you are
lots
buying
of triangles and shit.
Yeah, well, and also it's just like you get a box the size of like like a really formidable dictionary would probably come in, like just like a foot high by like 6-inch deep box that slides open and has like 4 manuals in it.
Right.
Oh, it's so good. Where it's like just you're buying heavy machinery right now. This
totally.
copy of AutoCAD is actually. When it was like basically defining your business by the fact that you had paid the like $7,000 for this piece of software, and now you are able to compete with other companies the way that you would buy like a printing press or a fabrication machine.
Yeah, totally.
That era is completely gone. My dream collector's edition of Quadrilateral Cowboy is one that comes packaged in that style, where it's just like
that'll be very good.
Weird like dongles and just a huge fat manual. I don't know what would be in that manual though.
Yeah,
nothing.
Brendan would have ideas. For that of all people. Nick Cornick says, with Dishonored Halloween fast approaching, what will your appropriately old-timey costumes be? Is Dishonored Halloween an old-timey holiday?
I don't know.
I think you just dress like you're a Dishonored person. Well, maybe in Dishonored Halloween, you dress as old-timey people and don't scare each other. I'm pretty sure. In other ways, though, it is very similar to our Halloween.
Yeah. I don't know.
I'm glad that this just introduces new lore into what Dishonored Halloween is.
It's just backdoors some new Dishonored lore. I have no idea what my old-timey Dishonored Halloween costume is.
Yeah.
Nick, what is yours?
That's a tough one. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Old timey?
Yeah.
Christ, I don't know.
You'll dress as Christ, an appropriately old timey character.
Yes.
I'll be a train engineer. That seems like an an old timey one.
Yeah. Right.
Like sort of stripy overalls and a little hat.
Yeah.
Seems good.
Yeah, that's good. You can pull that off.
Yeah. Chris, how about you?
Oh man,
I'll be an admiral of like a fleet.
A Dishonored,
your photo.
Yeah.
Photo
Oh, that's true.
Actually,
Well, I'll be
yeah,
more like Napoleon era, just with the hat.
Sure.
Yeah. That's mine.
God, you'll be an Age of character.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know.
Ugh.
I don't know. I'm so terrible at questions like this.
You've been paid to answer this question.
I know I have. God, what would I be? I would be some like junior officer supporting Nick. I would just be subservient to Nick.
Boring.
Brecken.
I'll be on my train.
Let's see. What do like old? I mean, if we're all like officials of some kind, if Jake is like running a railroad train and Nick is an admiral, I guess I could then in that case be like a like old like people who worked professions still had uniforms. I'm trying to think of like what a good. I mean, I guess train engineers still do. That's one of actually the remaining like you still actually dress up in like a nice thing. I guess given. I mean, this is so similar to trains, but like, if you watch older movies in which like subway systems exist, like those people still dressed in like really sharply because you just had to. Like, I would be some kind of municipal infrastructure, just given what I'd love in my life, I'd be some kind of like municipal infrastructure employee.
To that point, when Muni drivers are wearing a uniform that has clearly just come back from the cleaner and is really crisp, it's actually awesome. Like Muni outfits are really good.
Those like brown earth tones. Yeah, it looks really nice.
They just updated them like a
did
couple weeks ago. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Are they still good?
Yeah, for the first time in years. I don't really remember.
I'll have to look that up.
They're a little more space agey.
Muni is the San Francisco Municipal Railroad, which is our transit system here in San Francisco.
Isn't it SFMTA? Isn't it the Municipal Transit Authority? And
I guess
Muni is
the railway. Yeah, the municipal railway
or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Stephen Norrie says, "Fuck, marry, kill. Your choices are the other two hosts plus Steve Gaynor."
Well, fuck Nick.
Yeah.
I'll marry Steve and I'll kill you.
Okay, fair enough. I'm gonna give Nick a break here. I'm gonna fuck Steve Gaynor because fuck that guy. Seriously. I'm going to marry Nick, and I'm going to kill Jake because he killed me. I got to revenge him from beyond the grave. And that means, Nick, you're married to a ghost now.
Oh, okay,
so enjoy that. Yeah. Steve was murdered by a ghost, which I think is only appropriate. Oh, no, wait, no.
Yeah, only one of us is going to be alive at the end of this.
Yeah, that's
of the
true.
four of us. Only one
Nick's
of us.
Well, Nick is the only one. Nick is now alive still. Well, no. Nick...
Yes. You're dead, I'm dead. Nick is alive,
Nick's
Steve is alive.
Steve's dead because your only person left to kill is Steve. So you have to kill Steve, and now you have to decide about our ghosts.
I have to kill Steve? All right.
You don't. You can kill a ghost.
There's just I guess you could kill a ghost. That's
rules.
Brutal.
No, I'm then killing that ghost.
Then you're a ghost too.
Well, are you then just removed from the astral plane? And
then you're just eyes floating around. This is a video game podcast, Chris. Pac-Man.
Removed from the astral plane.
All right, well, Nick, what are you gotta, let's roll this dice.
Fuck me, marry me, kill me.
Fair enough. All Steve Gaynor lives.
Yeah. See, amazingly, through a weird loophole, Steve Gaynor is the last host standing.
Chad said Nick's going to fuck a ghost, but it didn't happen.
Well, it depends what order you executed those commands in.
That's true.
All right. Ian McNichol says, "It seems there's a push towards systematically generated narratives with some games, such as the Nemesis system in Shadow of Mordor. Do you believe that this way of creating narratives in games will become more popular as we're able to construct more robust systems? Or might we stay the course with narrative-driven games that are designed to deliver a particular experience?" I think that stuff might become more popular, but I don't think it's going to become the norm in narrative games. I mean, that stuff can be really cool and work in really interesting ways that have emotional payoff, but I think reducing narratives to systems is something that is not... I'm aware that this is the kind of statement that like maybe is sort of a Luddite kind of thing, or like sounds like limiting, but I genuinely don't think, at least with any of the ways that we currently understand interactive systems in video games, like I'm not speaking for like the future of like quantum computing or anything like that, but like in any version of our present reality, regardless of what might happen like far into the future, I haven't seen anything that suggests to me that systemically generated narratives, which is different than like general systemic possibility spaces, in which I think there's massive possibility and huge dividends, but in like creating specifically like what I think this reader is asking about, which is sort of Shadow of Mordor style like generative narrative, I don't think there's a lot of... I think that is like a niche area. I don't think it is the next frontier.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like it's the way it works in that game, at least, and I feel like the way that it's probably most likely to evolve is just another tool in the sort of immersive Sims school of players stories things, which are always a lot closer to, oh, I poked a thing in the game and then it chased through a bunch of weird possibilities and gave me back a surprising result. I still think like I consider that like it's fine that that's a player story, but I don't really consider that an act of storytelling.
Yes, it's meaningful because it happened to you mainly.
It gives the players the tool to tell a story to someone else, but in and of itself is not really a story being told, in my opinion.
Yes,
I think wanting, like a story being told to you, or a story that you're experiencing, is still very different than you creating the materials for a story that you will later tell someone.
And I should be careful to note that like I am a huge exponent of the immersive sim model of
it's awesome.
Interactive systems. I think it's amazing. I mean, I think games that give the player tools to sort of poke and prod at a systemically rich world that then returns experiences that are unique and multiplicative and subtle and diverse based on all of these colliding systems. I think that's amazing. I just think whenever people try to like get into, typically I think when people have said, oh wow, and we're going to use this to like, this will create stories, again, with a meaning of stories speaking to like the replacement for a created narrative, it just, I have never experienced one of those that feels satisfying in the way that a well-told story does. Like I think those tools are used for different things and are just better at like some things are better at certain things than other things, and I think that's one case of it.
I love that feeling in sort of, I guess, immersive sim heritage games where you feed a bunch of stuff in and you get that feeling out, but it always ends up feeling like almost like a pointillistic experience where you get a ton of data returned, a ton of little of these micro experiences, kind of paints the picture of an overall theme, but that's still very different than an explicit sort of singular through line of what people usually mean when they talk about what a story is.
It also, a lot of times, what that ends up doing is averaging out the experience of any one of those stories into a kind of equilibrium. Like, you can have a amazing like outlier experience where like, wow, this was incredible, and that's the one you're going to go tell to someone else. You're going to be like, wow, and like the thing you're not going to say is, out of 1,000 one of these that were basically unremarkable, this one that happened was incredible, and that's the one I'm going to tell you. And our podcast has gotten a lot of mileage out of that over the years. Of
separating out that wheat.
But like ideally, an actual story should be pretty interesting without needing you to wade through 1,000, like 99% of like.
I want to hear what Nick says. I want a controversial dissenting opinion.
Oh, I think we're all doomed. I think
we're doomed.
We're definitely a weird controversy.
No, I mean we're extinct. I mean we're gonna.
What are you talking
Are you talking about human beings or like people?
Storytellers. I think AI, the AI revolution, deep learning, big data. I think it's just it's right around the corner, guys. It's right around the corner.
It's like when the orc comes back and says, "You killed my father. Identify these 3 street signs."
Yeah, I mean, I think like really super future long term, I would not be shocked if when AI actually breaks through a threshold I would not be shocked if a computer eventually could string together some kind of story that would entertain, a general audience. That
I agree with that. Yeah,
but it's like probably a ways off from even like approaching that. I've seen like a few attempts at that, and it's pretty laughable right now.
And when that happens, I think it will come from a completely different type of problem solving and, computational development and design thinking than like
exactly.
It will not be a game developer solving this problem.
The Nemesis system is not going to evolve into procedural narrative.
Yeah, I agree.
Facebook is going to present it to us by starting to sell us streaming television shows built by a robot,
or something that we literally haven't encountered yet. But it will probably have more in common with that than with Shadow of Mordor.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
I think
totally
so too.
Okay. Reggie Clark asks. During the development of Firewatch, did the main character ever have a head, or was he always designed to never show his face? Can you give us any teasers of future Campo Santo games to come? No. Huge fan of Firewatch and The Walking Dead.
Firewatch, the main character definitely has a face that was modeled. We at one point actually talked about the very first shot of Firewatch being your character's face looking at himself in the mirror 3 weeks into the job, and then we realized, one, we didn't know if we could animate a face convincingly, and two, starting 3 weeks into the job seemed bad when we wanted players to understand what the character's lot in life was and what their job was. So it all got...
Yeah, although that moment could have simply been written to occur not 3 weeks into the job. But
yeah. That's true. It could have basically been you get to the fire lookout
tower. There
were
were a lot of reasons we didn't do that.
Yeah. But he has a head. He in fact had a head when walking around in the game most of the game. It was only, I think, hidden from the player camera.
We saw the head a lot because we constantly had to look at, just as making the game, you watch it running from all kinds of weird angles.
Yeah, he has a head because we for a long time had him casting a real shadow in the world, but then we couldn't reconcile, we just didn't have the time or resources to reconcile the fact that the character was animated for first person against the shadow being third person, where if you've ever seen that gif of the character in Crisis who crouches behind a wall up and down, it just looks like a weird elastic gummy
spider
thing.
Person.
Henry in Firewatch, the player in Firewatch's hands were always sort of contorted forward to act to the first person camera,
so that you could see them nicely in front of you.
And it was then bent so that if you looked down you could see your body, and the hands would sort of realign into perspective, but that meant that his shadow looked like just this horrible Tim Burton character that had or like a Freddy Krueger nightmare sequence.
So we were then going to have two different animation sets and I guess rigs of Henry.
It would be the same rig, but there would just be correctives put back on the animation.
The shadow would only be cast by the normally animated one, and then the crazy first person one would not cast a shadow, and then that was complicated because it's like everything he does needs two parallel animations, and it's just a big pain in the ass.
Yep. So instead, he has a blob shadow, which was frustratingly expensive because we had to have a Unity projector pointing a blob at the ground so that it would adhere to the ground, but not be. Anyway, it was annoying. He has a head, and you never see it.
Polly Bats asks, if you had to be in the middle of a human centipede, who would be in front and who behind you?
Ruined. I don't want to know.
I think we're vetoing this question.
Answer, don't want to know.
We found that you've tested out the limits of the Ruination, and we found it. And there it is. Torbjorn Gronevik Dahl asks, what are some of the most well-known movies you haven't watched?
Everybody Wants Some.
Oh, yeah. You just gave up. Whoever was asking about this, stop asking that question. I haven't seen any Back to the Futures after the first one, which I only saw within the last year. And every time that ever comes up, people are scandalized by it.
I've never seen Dirty Dancing.
I watched that a year or two ago with my wife. It was good.
I had never seen The Thin Man until you endorsed it, and then I saw
you watched it?
It was good.
Oh, what did you think?
It was really good.
Isn't that movie super
it's
fun?
really fun and good.
Yeah, that's a great movie. I'm sure there are a bunch. Movies are one of those things where there's every human on the planet has a bunch of those where you say one and someone's like, what? You haven't seen blah? But that surprised person would also, surely there's countless examples of things where they have not seen them and someone else would be scandalized by it.
Did you guys see that thing that was going around on Twitter over the last couple of weeks that were the 5 movies that you would show to another person so they understand who you are, and the 5 games and the 5 albums? I looked at that and just went, oh man, if anyone ever tried to pull any of this shit on me, they would be the most horrible person in the entire world.
I had the exact same reaction.
Here,
what do you mean by that?
Play these 5 games to understand me. Are you fucking serious? Are you fucking serious right now? That thread was just
I really didn't
name
like it.
3 X-Men.
I think I'm missing something.
I just mean the personal investment that you're putting on another prospective person by even framing the question like that is insane.
Sure.
Yeah.
As opposed to just 5 movies you love.
As opposed to
my answer to that was fine. Tell me one video game that you love and why, and we probably understand each other. Except that, at least in the specific realm of video games, except that it's a different one. God, that whole thing just it grossed me out. I know the intent of it, but the actual phrasing of it was just oh my God.
Yeah.
Between you answering book, movie, video game, and album, you're just invest a year in your life, and then your reactions are invalid, but hopefully it will allow you to understand what I see in them, and you'll learn about me as a person. It was a weird.
I had a weird Ready Player One reaction to that. Where it's just I feel like you want to understand me. Watch the films of the '80s. Just
I felt like my reaction was way an overreaction, but at the same time, I just went and sort of. My actual reaction at the time was to just sort of back away and not engage with any of those threads. But
recoil in horror to these 5 Twitter memes, and you will understand.
Exactly. exactly. Yeah.
There are a bunch of other.
Oh man, there needs to be.
Watch these 5 violators to understand me.
So that is it's that the meme of the boyfriend looking at the other girl, but it's person who hasn't played these 5 video games.
Yeah, there are a lot of kind of like nerd canon movies that I have not seen. I think there are many of those. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Did you? Oh no, we all said something for this. Okay, so we all answered it.
Yes.
Arden Avery says, I just found out about auto-tuned karaoke, and the world is a bit less magical today. What's your piece of technology you dislike because it removes the charm and attraction of the thing it supposedly helps?
Oh, so many things.
Auto-tuned karaoke. That's disgusting.
I've never heard of that,
awful.
but that's
really awful.
I would love vocoded karaoke though.
I mean, that is effectively the same thing.
I guess that's true. When I think of auto-tuning, I think of it being a little bit more cunning, whereas when I think of vocoding, I think of a person who sings relatively flatly and like
but in real time, like, isn't that just what's going to happen?
I guess it is.
I mean, the only reason we call those different things is because auto-tuning, as we understand it, is just done carefully in a studio to mask those hard edges.
Fair enough.
But
so then I've never experienced auto-tuned karaoke, but can you just go and have it go like would it actually bend you?
Actually, I don't know.
Because then you could then auto-tuned karaoke could become its own medium, and you could do really awesome
that would be
shit.
Super fun.
Okay.
I would do that just for the sort of, if you're engaging with it on its own terms rather than using it to make you better. Mm-hmm. If you're actually in it for the sort of play of it, and
if you're an auto-tuned karaoke performance artist, as opposed to
just having fun with your friends, but knowing that the goal is to have fun with that thing instead of to like try and pretend you're a better karaoke singer than you actually are.
Yeah,
right. Because the latter, that's pointless. What's the point of that?
That bums me out. But usually things like this don't actually bum me out because it's just. I still find it interesting when someone makes a piece of technology that actually sort of like invisibly makes something easier or does a cool trick. But it's because I think the actual process of that is interesting. I usually don't like the results. Like exactly this conversation we just had about auto-tuned karaoke is my usual arc with these things. Like, oh, that's gross. Well, if you actually like engage with it on its face and become interested in the process of it, that's fine. But then when you think about what it actually does, is it just makes thousands and thousands of people think they're good at singing when they're not. Like, that's frustrating.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I had a weird experience the other night when I was taking a cab for like kind of a stressful reason. I had to like take a cab somewhere because I, just had to. And like doesn't matter why for the purpose of this discussion. But the only reason I say that is because I was like in that situation where I'm like, I just need to get where I'm going like now. That's like the reason I'm not taking the bus, for instance.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I just need to get where I'm going, and I just want to get there. And I get in the car, and the guy was like blasting what sounded like late era David Gilmour or something, like David Gilmour of Pink Floyd. That's just like long fucking like 10-minute tracks of just nonstop guitar solos that just go on forever. And I'm like, Christ almighty, like this is not what I need in my life right now. Mm-hmm. And then what was insane about it, and the reason this question reminded me of it, is that he had a GPS going, and every time
would it duck it?
Oh, no.
No, it didn't duck it, but maybe it did. I don't know. That doesn't matter. But the point is that every time the GPS came on, I've never heard this before, and I wanted to murder this man by the end of the ride.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
It was this like auto-tuned robot voice going, turn left now. And every instruction was like, in 500 feet, turn right. And it was like on top of music blaring, and obviously they're not like exactly in the same key.
What if it was?
I thought it was at first. What
if it was like Microsoft Songsmith is reading that data?
That's what I thought at first, and I still would have been annoyed given my mental state at the time, but I also would have kind of respected it.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was like almost like a Winamp visualization kind of thing where it's like interacting with the music, but it's not. What was crazy about it is that like it was weird because I started to figure out the musical language. Like turn left always went turn left. It always did that exact little thing, which it went from being annoying to being like, oh, I'm like picking out the musical motifs of the thing, to the point when you hear turn left like for the 19th time and it sounds exactly the same on top of this just like like shredded like sort of like dad guitar shredding, which, like, don't get me wrong, I love Pink Floyd and I love David Gilmour, but this was not what I needed at that moment. And, like, it was, I was about to go fucking crazy, and I couldn't, like...
That's like the most tragic cyberpunk reality, by the way, because I'm sure also, as all modern cabs are, it just looked like a taxi cab from The Fifth Element inside, where there's like 3 Android phones and the payment processor in the front, and, like, the meter and the payment processor inside, and like the 2 TV screens playing ads all like wired onto the cage.
Yeah, we're
so having all of that shit happening at the same time as the radio is probably like, the world is terrible in all ways. People can't see because there's horrible fires and floods, and the president is insane, and then it's all like, wow, turn left. Oh God!
Exactly. This is what really differentiates all this shit from like the cyberpunk future that is foreseen in movies like Blade Runner or Brazil or something, where like you're
living in Transmetropolitan, actually.
It's not even. It is kind of Transmetropolitan. It's
closer,
but it's even dumber and more mundane than that. Like the thing about something like Brazil or Blade Runner is that you're living in this sort of oppressive future, but there's also kind of a solidarity of everyone being like, this is foisted upon us, and we all live in it, and we do the best we can with it.
Everyone acknowledges that they're being oppressed and that they live in a bad future.
And they're sort of downbeaten, but they're all downbeaten together, and there's like this ruling class that they all can like resent in common, kind of. I mean, I know I'm oversimplifying it, but whatever. That is like the charitable
Everyone
human
feels the weight
of it.
in Blade Runner or whatever.
But I mean, the thing in reality, and obviously this is what would actually happen is in reality, like not that version of it. The version of it that actually happens is everyone just uses this shit for the dumb shit that they like, and there's no shared solidarity. It's just like, I just want to hear this garbage all the time because I can, and it's here, and why wouldn't I? And I'm just in the back seat like going crazy, and it's like, well, it's this guy's cab, it's whatever, it's his right. But like, there's no fucking solidarity there. It's just like we're both miserable separately. So, I don't know.
Honestly, I think Back to the Future 2 does a pretty good job of conveying that version of the future.
Oh, really? See, I haven't seen that.
It definitely does.
I mean, it's like a goofy 80s sitcom version of it, but
no, it's
not too bad when it comes to just everyone lives in a world full of just vile noise, but they're just derping around being an idiot in a town.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll have to watch that.
You don't. You don't have to watch it. I can't believe you haven't seen it, though.
Daniel asks, I'm in Maryland for work, and it got me wondering, does Nick have any stories about his time in Maryland while working for Bethesda? And if nothing springs to mind, I guess just general impressions or a dismissive one-off quip would do. This question is not in any way affiliated with or endorsed by Quip toothbrushes.
Nick, you have one story about your time at Bethesda. It has been told.
The question's actually more about Maryland than about Bethesda Studios.
God, I don't know. Maryland. Everybody.
Did you live in Maryland? I forget.
I did.
Or did you live in one? Aren't there like a bunch of states all slammed together right
Well, yeah. There's Maryland. There's Virginia. There's
West Coast man asks.
They call it the DMV, which is really repulsive. They call it the DMV.
Everyone calls it the DMV.
Yeah. No, I don't mean the area is called the DMV.
Oh, right.
It's DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and it's really stupid.
Yeah. And then also in Massachusetts, where I lived for 2 years, they call the DMV the RMV. Which is a weird, uncanny thing. Yeah.
Cool.
So everything's weird in the Northeast.
Yeah.
Well, what about Maryland? What are your Maryland?
Oh, God, I don't know. I mean, the thing I associate with Maryland is just like crabbing, like every year.
The thing I associate with Maryland is crabbing.
No,
what is crabbing?
People love eating blue crabs in Maryland. It's like the Maryland thing you do. And like I got dragged down to this place down by the Potomac every year by people at Bethesda to like sit down at a table, and you sit down at this long table, and some guy takes a
crab.
He takes a big steel pot and he just dumps it on the table, and all these like hundreds of crabs just spill out. And they're all steaming, and then everybody just like grabs a crab, and then you just take this big hammer and smash the shit out of this single tiny crab. And then, like, because no preparation has gone into this crab, you're just, like, digging through, like, green guts, and, like, people are eating the guts, and then they love that Old Bay, like,
Bay seasoning, yeah.
Oh, and everyone's just pouring that all over everything, and it gets on your hands, and your hands turn red, and you got guts all over your face, and it's just, like, supposed to be, like, the fun thing you do. You sit around a table and eat guts for, like, 3 hours, but it's just vile and disgusting, and then that Bay seasoning gets so like ground into your hands that for a whole week your hands just look and smell like bay seasoning. It's just the absolute worst. And those crabs, they're so small. It's mostly guts. You get like 2 bites of meat and it's maybe 20 minutes of work per crab. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like, it is the stupidest tradition. Everyone's like, oh, you sit around the table and it's like a social thing. You talk and eat, crab gut, and it's just,
That doesn't sound that bad to me.
Oh, it's fine. I just wish it was a better food. I just wish that there was like more to the food part. It's so disgusting. Ugh. Anyway. That's what I associate with Maryland.
I think this person got their money's worth.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Michi Leroux asks, what is I don't know if this person's actually French or just of French descent. What is your worst experience when dealing with consumers? Whether that be customers at a restaurant you waited at or an obnoxious game fan, I'm sure you must all have some interesting stories. Also, obligatory, when are you mailing the postcards question?
We've already answered the postcards question, and
some of them today.
Some of them are going out today. Well,
I mean, I've worked a bunch of jobs dealing with customers, and like the one that was least objectionable was when I worked for a while at just a supermarket. I worked at a Vons, and I actually have no real like specific negative experiences with that. But that's probably because I was too junior to like have to put up with anything that was escalated. I remember I worked for years for pretzel cart. I've talked about this definitely before on the podcast, on some podcast or another. I worked for, a small company in San Diego that sold pretzels at conventions and events and things like that, like big soft pretzels with dipping sauce. And that was like, that definitely taught me something really fundamental about consumers, which is just, it taught me one, something about consumers, and two, the way that like, sort of a facet of how capitalism works where like, even at a small company like ours, responsibility and sort of the command chain is so distributed that like no one individually that you can talk to has responsibility for everything. So you end up in this position where you're sitting there working at this cart and some customer is like yelling at you because the dipping sauce, because like 50 cents seems like a ripoff for the dipping sauce. And I'm like, I have no control over it. Like, this is so far beyond anything that I can do anything about.
Where's
like,
my Szechuan sauce?
It's just like, well, sure, right? Like, it's the same exact thing. All that fucking McDonald's Szechuan sauce shit. Like, people screaming at the employee behind the counter, and like, they have, fine, whatever. Like, you expected this thing and you didn't get it, but like, this person has no, like, 0% influence on the things you want. Like, and I just remember constantly dealing with that because they were expensive. The pretzels we sold were fucking expensive, but it's because we were at events where people were willing to pay a lot for them. And like, I'm not defending that or attacking it. It like, from my position of the person working there, it was just a law of the universe. And like, the justice or injustice of the situation was so far beyond my like ability to do anything about it that being trapped in this constant, like, never-ending argument with customers about it was just like,
people just, that's
insane.
Just how a human brain works. I helped, like, I didn't ever have a retail job because I'm a weirdo who got a really lucky first job in high school, but I did volunteer at polling places a lot when I was like in late teens in high school. And it was like, all right, we're here to vote for a county supervisor and some measures. And just I, as a 17-year-old, I've talked about this on the podcast before, I'm sure, where just like someone will just walk up to me and be like, I want to know right now why they replaced the intersection on da-da-da and da-da-da with a roundabout. That it makes no sense. Da-da-da. I have that's like, man, am I not going to be able to change that roundabout? Like, that's like civic engineering. I'm 17.
Yeah.
I'm here because, like, I like local politics.
Yeah.
But not that part yet. I'm a child. I just thought it was, like, a good thing to do as a citizen to help people sign up to vote. Yeah. But, like, wow, I don't know anything about that factory that's not there anymore or whatever. Like, when the river's being dredged, holy shit, people. Yep. But I'm the face. Or, like, it's interesting that's just how people work. Like, we've had these really nasty, like, basically like city destroying fires in the northern Bay Area in the last week. And my wife's a school teacher. This last Friday, a bunch of schools were closed because of smoke, but the one that she works at was not. I think because the district decided to stay open, not the administrators, not the teachers. But of course, a ton of teenagers come in and are just like, "Why are we at school?" And you're like, "Well."
I saw a ton of stuff about that.
Boy, could I not tell you the answer to that question.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
People just yell at the face that's right in front of them.
No, it's true.
Especially Rick and Morty fans.
I mean, I had a bunch of experiences growing up that led me to just never be that person. Because I remember my dad is also just someone who would like scream at waiters if he thought that there was some injustice that had been committed. And I remember as a kid being just mortified. I was just like, I basically wanted to die. I remember one time, as we were at a restaurant called the Brooklyn Diner in Manhattan, and my dad, I guess he didn't like the food or something. I don't even know what his complaint was. And as we were leaving, he was like he got up and yelled at waiters like, "I'm from Brooklyn, and I can't believe you would put Brooklyn on the name of your restaurant and serve this kind of crap. This is disgusting." And we walked out, and which like is an amazing complaint to lodge. It's like, oh, are you kidding? Like, we're in Times Square or whatever, and you went, I don't even know where it was, but whatever. Something like, what do you fucking expect? And I remember like, I was a teen, and so I had some amount of money, and I took all of the money that I had on my person, which was probably most of the money that I had. I was probably like
threw it on the ground and said, "Pick it up."
No, I remember like I waited for my dad to get a few steps ahead of me, and I secretly put all the money like on the thing because my dad didn't tip him, and I just like I wanted to like melt into the floor.
Yeah,
I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like I remember apologizing. I'm like, I'm sorry, and I put all the money I had in there, whatever it was, and like slunk out and that like those kinds of experiences plus working a series of retail jobs, which also included working at a Game Crazy when I was in college for years, which was it was the video game store subsidiary of Hollywood Video, probably neither of which exist at this point. And just working there for so long and just dealing with like, I mean, there was less people who would scream at you and more people who would just like come in and wanted like show off all their video game knowledge for hours. Like they would just come into the Game Crazy to like hang out there all day.
That's because Game Crazy was kind of the good one. If you didn't have a Funko Land, Game Crazy was the one that actually had all of the old, like multi-generational spanning
we sold
shit.
Games going all the way back to the NES. Games going all the way back to the NES, which was pretty cool. Like that was actually a really awesome thing, that Game Crazy. But like it meant you'd get these like just kind of insufferable people who would come in to like tell you how cool they are and like not buy anything.
Did you leave yourself tips to compensate for these horrible people? By the way, that's really nice that you did that at that restaurant when after having that experience. That's like, it's legitimately a cool thing that you did.
Yeah, I mean, I just felt so bad for the guy.
Yeah.
I've definitely added on to my dad's tip before.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Sure. I'm sure this is a thing that a lot of people have experienced. Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully you came up with your own like Game Crazy therapy when that would happen to you. You'd be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir."
I mean, Game Crazy was the easiest one to deal with out of any job I had because if there weren't people in the store, or if there was that guy in the store but he wasn't buying anything, you could just play video games on the demo machine. Exactly. Yeah.
Play that Mario Sunshine demo all day.
And you could even, a thing that we did that we were like not technically supposed to, but was definitely tacitly, like for sure tacitly allowed by management, was to just open new games and play them in the store and then just put them back.
That's probably actually, I mean, you're probably not supposed to do that, but they also secretly like that it means that their employees can actually tell someone something about a new video game.
Yeah,
like within days
I definitely was like an informed employee. And
an informed gamer.
I would help a mom. I actually remember a mom coming in one time and was like, my son wants this Burnout game. Like, should I buy it for him? And I was like, oh yeah, Burnout's great. And she's like, what is it? And I'm like, well, you basically like intentionally get in outrageous car accidents and like try to like hurl the flaming wreck of the car as far as you can. And she was like, I would say it was one of those moments where you realize what the insane disconnect is between what passes as like a normal video game experience, like to a normal person who doesn't like play video games or care about video games. And she was like, I don't think I'm gonna get that one. And I was like, no, but it's really like, it's really expressive and it's like a fun way, like the systems collide in like fun ways. And she was like, that sounds really off-putting. And I was like, yeah, and it does, now that it's coming out of my mouth.
Yeah, you've got to say, like, it's like a movie stunt simulator. The cars are empty, but that's not the stuff that you start with. You're definitely like, you cause the hugest car accident possible, rack up the most damages that you can in this small town. Yeah.
I mean, and that's like way less objectionable than even a lot of games, which are just like, you spend 8 hours murdering people with an assault rifle.
God, someone in chat is saying, the kid glaring at capital not cool Chris behind capital mom shoulder.
Yeah.
That kid was not there, but if they were, you would have been not a cool gamer who has played the latest releases. You would have been an adult. You'd be a dad. Yep. You were a full dad right then.
Yep. So anyway,
that's like the conversation where you're describing it in the enthusiastic voice, and the kid is hearing you be like, "Well, it is a game in which cars crash into each other and cause the most damage possible." Like a kid seeing it through their mom's perspective, being like, "No, no." Also being review bombed on Steam because of something that you say on the internet is horrible.
That was bad.
Anyway,
Robert Hoffman writes, this is the last question. I recently re-listened to the tale of Nick's airport encounter with Jeff Goldblum. This was in Idle Thumbs 43, Jeff Gone Goldblum. At one point, Chris asks Nick if he's a fan of Mr. Goldblum's work. Upon receiving an affirmative response, Chris incredulously replies, "Really? I hate that guy." I'm going to pause the question here because I was reading this question when I was assembling this document.
That's me.
I went back to the video. I definitely fucking did not say anything. I did not say that at all.
Let's look at the latest date modified on that episode of Idle Thumbs.
I can't do that on YouTube, so I went to YouTube because it has the timestamp versions. I definitely did not say that. No, I didn't. What I did express incredulity because what the sentiment I did express was, what is there to even be a fan of?
Right.
Because I was at the time solely familiar with Jeff Goldblum through like 3 movies, and I'm like,
in which he's awesome.
Yes, he is, but I didn't know anything about the actual man himself at all. Like
I feel like we were slightly ahead of the Jeff Goldblum curve too.
Yeah, I think Nick put us ahead of that curve with this. Anyway, so the question continues.
Not much though. We were still post Wes Anderson Jeff Goldblum, which was the beginning of the Jeff Goldblum curve.
I guess that's true. Yeah. Anyway, really continues here. Given the collective thumbs obsession with the man in the present day, this adamantly negative appraisal was startling to hear. Are there any other elements of your lives today that are diametrically opposed to the way you acted or felt in your earlier days? Cases in which you've not just changed your view, but in fact moved from one extreme end of the spectrum to the other?
Yes, 1,000 million things.
Yeah, lots of things.
Everything that I did that was horrible and bad when I was young is now replaced with me attempting to be less horrible and bad at them, but not ever thinking that I'm good at them.
Yeah.
Like as far as just views and things that I strive to be better at.
Yeah.
One of the easier ones to get over was thinking Jeff Goldblum is cool.
I have to, I'm going to say, this is like, I don't know if this is what Jake was getting at, but I have to say, like, realistically, probably in all but like outlying cases, to at least some degree, obviously some people more than others and to some people much less than others, but like to some degree, I feel like if you're an American male, if the answer to this isn't yes, you're probably not on the heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
Like I mean, I'm not to say that everyone has to believe the same things or like have the same political outlook. That's not true. But like there definitely are a lot of things that like if you just grow up, and this is not just America, but a lot of places, like if you just like grow up as a dude, you're just taught terrible things by implication. Like it's crazy. Like even people who are like basically on the right track, there's still just like all these things lurking everywhere that you're just encouraged to think shittily about because you don't have to not. And definitely like getting yourself on the right track there is like part of just being an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a weird, it's...
And if you've been doing podcasts for 10 years, the oldest ones that exist, in fact, document a lot of really horrible things about yourself that are just on the record forever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Such as Chris hating Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, I did say that. I said it affirmatively and vociferously.
It's good that that's an example of something you didn't actually say and you had a far more nuanced and developed opinion of Jeff Goldblum.
I mean, I don't know if it was nuanced and developed. It was ambiguous. Like it was ambivalent is what I should say, is what my opinion was.
But man, holy shit.
Man, what a downer of a last question.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. The Idle Thumbs Ruination cast, which we did successfully ruin at the very end there by bringing the energy way down in a moment of sober self-reflection. If you...
I mean, we could have also been like, I really thought that hamburgers were only good when they have cheese and ketchup only, but now I like a hamburger that has all the food on it. Like, I was so wrong.
I've gone back and forth in my life about general sandwich preferences from like, I want a sandwich with everything on it to I want just like the bare bones to I want a like sandwich with all the stuff. And I think I'm actually now at the sort of adult middle ground where it's like I want the nice collection of things appropriate for that
so
sandwich.
You're just boring, middle-aged boring
that is a boring opinion, but it's one I'm happy to have at this point. But I've definitely, with stuff like hamburgers, I have gone back and forth a lot. We've weirdly talked about that. On
I'm
a
sure
recent
we
episode
have.
of something.
There's only so many things we could talk about.
One of them is hamburgers. As an American male, you spend a lot of your time thinking about hamburgers.
As an American male, you haven't really lived that much of a life compared to other people, it turns out. The end.
Anyway, thanks for listening to the Idle Thumbs Ruination Online.
I had to drop it down right there at the end.
And if you would like to submit a question to be answered on the Ruination, you can head over to our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/idlethumbs, and all the details about all the different levels of support and their rewards can be found there. And we really, really, really appreciate everyone who has signed up. It is so, so, so meaningful to us, and it allows us to do this podcast in this nice studio that we have that makes it sound good and be as professional as our bullshit will allow it to be.
Yeah, we're the ones holding it back at this point.
Exactly.
To bring it all the way back to the very first question.
Right. We will do another one of these next month. Stay tuned to this feed if you're listening to the podcast feed for another episode of Idle Thumbs, the video game podcast, coming soon. And with that, for Idle Thumbs, I am Chris Remo.
I am Nick Ricken.
I am Jake Rodkin.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye. It's a JavaScript file.
It's too bad it's not also a JSON file that saves you preferences.
I know.
Jason.
Was that a
Sega Scream?
David Cage? Oh.
No, it was David Cage.
Okay.
it was not Sega Scream.
God,
I didn't know if that was
stupid
supposed to be-
mashup of the Press X to Jason video in which every time he says Jason, it's performed
Jason?
in the style of the Sega splash screen.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Jason or Jason. Yeah, it's both. You have to randomly
Either
choose
way.
between both of them.
If you get the song or the scream.
Yeah.
Man, now I'm
Idle
thinking
Thumbs 313, the
Yeah.
song or the scream.
that would be
Jason.
It would have to be a sister episode to the meme scream.
That's true,
From this
yeah.
week's Important If True.
Yeah.
Because now all I'm thinking about is if the Sega Scream had lasted slightly longer, there would have definitely. If the Sega Scream had, let me back this all the way up. If Vine had existed during the, was it 2004? Was that when? There would definitely be a Howard Dean Scream that had a Sega Scream, like half second long internet video. But
Yeah.
no, video wasn't cool then.
No.
There would be like a developers version, probably.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
Jason.